So much attention is paid to the people going into a house of worship that it's easy to miss the importance of the people going out. Where are they going? What will they do when they get there? And how has their religious experience changed them? Weekly worship is a vital part of a congregation's contribution to the life of its community. But by no means the only part that matters.
Hello, I'm Marcy Davis. Faith and community, the public role of religion, aims to deepen our understanding of the diversity and vitality of religion in America, its people, institutions, and ideas, and their influence on our life together. The series is based on a study, the largest of its kind, that included interviews with religious and civic leaders, congregational members, and public citizens in metropolitan Indianapolis, a study conducted by the Polis Center at Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis. An earlier series, Religion as a Window on Culture, illustrates the variety of religions that are practiced in the United States. But what we sometimes overlook is the diversity we find within America's predominant religious tradition, Christianity, its complexities and relationships to the larger culture and to other religions. In looking at this tradition in Indianapolis, we hope to provide a window through which other American cities can be viewed. With a population of 1.5 million people, Indianapolis is big enough to be diverse, yet small enough to comprehend. Through 11 episodes, Faith and Community will introduce you to the public role of religion.
Congregations are more than centers of worship and religious education. In ways large and small, religious institutions serve their members and their neighborhoods.
For one thing, they have real estate. They have meeting places. They also typically are located in prime areas on major street corners. They also have a pool of volunteers that can become involved in acts of social transformation. They have clergy who are oftentimes visionary. They're thinking outside the box in terms of what could occur. They have money. Not always, but oftentimes they have money. And if they don't have money, if, for example, they happen to be small congregations, they can band together with other small congregations and have a substantial influence.
Congregations also have the opportunity to reach out in ways that build social capital, the intangible but valuable bonds that link people in a community in the form of personal connections and mutual trust. That outreach might come in the form of a daycare center or an English as a second language program. Over the long run, that social capital develops a foundation of trust that can be turned into action.
I know a church where a lot of the people really served the aged well. They did bedpan duty volunteering. They didn't just do Christmas singing. They really were engaged, and it's pretty rough stuff to sit there through the hours with an Alzheimer's patient. And then they would come back and report how miserably run the place was, how inattentive the staff was, how there was lint under the beds, how the washroom wasn't clean, how the food was bad, and on and on. Other people in the church who didn't have time for or weren't good at the other said, all right, let's get a big bus, let's get the state capitol. We've got really lousy laws for supervision. Let's change the laws. That's a political act.
These religious institutions then have the potential, if they are energetic enough, to actually influence public policy. Now, we're going to have people on the right and the left religiously that will be voting very different ways. And I'm sure that's healthy. But the point is that they are really going to engage issues of substantive moral concern, and they're going to engage those at a political level.
A gift that is much more subtle, yet every bit as valuable.
In his stories, Jesus always helps his followers envision the kingdom of God.
The messages delivered inside a place of worship can change the world outside, one person at a time.
They have messages that are designed to impel them into the public. Whatever your faith is, all the founders said, go out and heal, go out and teach, go out and bring gifts, go out and learn, go out and judge. So that's in the text, and they can't duck those texts forever.
Membership in a congregation is often linked to strong ties to the community.
Well, one important thing that the faith world brings is a tremendous sense of volunteerism, whether it's the Catholic hospitals or it's Lutheran or Jewish family welfare social services. Many of these organizations are able to attract enormously committed volunteers because they believe that that is an important part of what it means to be a human being, a citizen of this kind of world and country.
Those who may be marginalized in other aspects of life, with little power or authority at work or at home, often end up gaining leadership skills at their houses of worship.
People who belong to congregations learn certain skills within their churches, skills of mobilizing, organizing. They learn skills of communication.
They provide their members with an opportunity to get practice at things like getting up in front of a group of people and giving a speech, or organizing an event, or presiding over a meeting, or writing letters, and just generally learning how it is to work together collectively to get something done.
An individual who has learned Robert's Rules of Order for a congregational committee might be more at ease chairing a neighborhood improvement group. Someone who develops skills leading a Sunday school class might decide to take on the challenge of leading a scout troop.
I can't think of any other institution where more adult Americans make a speech than they do on church premises. They make that report, they do the stewardship drive. More places where adults sing in public, and that's tremendously empowering.
So what we see in a lot of instances is actually upward social mobility within these groups. And I think that that upward social mobility is an indirect byproduct of their involvement in a religious community.
I see it all the time, civic leaders who are coming to the table on an issue that might be just seen as a social issue, but their faith shines through.
One of the major differences is that when a congregation or a parishioner in a congregation is participating in a social agency kind of activity, they're doing it as a Christian. They then have different stories that shape them. They might see themselves as a Good Samaritan. They might see themselves as one who's caring for Jesus when he was hungry or thirsty. They might see that I'm being a good neighbor and that I'm loving my neighbor. They might see themselves as being a person who is following Christ and being of giving up of him or herself. And so they come to the person who they serve differently.
One of the metro area's largest African American churches is showing what can be done to help young boys mature into responsible men. The Boys to Men program was started in 1996, based on a book of the same title by Light of the World Christian Church's pastor, Bishop T. Garrett Benjamin.
Our bishop had a vision. He saw that most of the boys in our community didn't have dads at home. And most of the men needed to be a role model for the boys.
Greg Garrett has a personal reason for managing the program.
I grew up in public housing for a good degree of my youth, and my mother always said, we need men to come and teach you boys how to be men. And, you know, that stuck with me.
Boys are referred to the program by the juvenile justice system or their schools. In any given week, as many as 25 youngsters show up for a combination of military drills, Bible training, and structured activities that all have a single aim: learning how to be a strong Christian man. For most of the boys, it's something they don't receive at home.
90% of the boys don't have dads at home or role figures of any male. And they just love to be around the men. We don't have to do anything. We could just stand in a room and let them play with us and talk to us, and they really enjoy that.
Youngsters as young as 5 may join Boys to Men, and they can stay until they're 18 years old. In the project's 6 years, half a dozen graduates have gone on to college.
We teach them the skills primarily out of the bishop's book about respect and about love and about what being a real man is. Real men put away toys and pick up tools. Real men don't just play, they pray. Real men don't just work out, they work. Real men don't just date, they develop relationships with women.
Respecting women and saving children, sir.
One powerful theme that runs through every session is strengthening the family through building respect for women.
Respecting women and saving children, sir.
The family unit can't exist if the male doesn't respect the female, and you know that passes down to the children. The dad's not respecting mom, you know, the kids feel like they, you know, can grow up the same way. And to build a strong family, there has to be respect, you know, from the father to the mother, and that's what we try to teach.
Strengthening the family and the community through faith.
Without faith, we're just being another social service organization. But we really believe that if we teach them faith, then they can build the ideals into walking in love. And when you walk in love, you want to help your neighbor, you want to bless your family, you want to be a good role model in the community. The biggest thing in the hood is hopelessness, so we try to build hope by showing them, you know, community at large is prospering. Community at large is prospering. You can prosper as they do.
There is another way congregations make their presence felt in a community, providing social leadership to meet a need. They can serve as incubators, where neighborhood programs get their start. Sometimes these projects take on lives of their own. The religious roots that were part of the founding impulse fade away over time, but the organization itself remains under secular leadership. The near South Side neighborhood of Fountain Square owes much of its current resurgence to Helen Fair, a United Methodist missionary returning home to retire in the mid-1980s.
The Fountain Square she came back to was a neighborhood that was very different than the neighborhood she left. When she lived here, it was a stable, middle-class neighborhood. She came back to a neighborhood that was in considerable disarray. And she talked about being tempted to just find a retirement home somewhere and move on, but felt God's calling on her to be involved in service to her neighborhood.
She was joined by the minister at her home church, Edwin Ray United Methodist. Molly Clements had been a missionary herself.
They did a survey of a 6-block by 6-block area and found 140 houses that were either boarded up, condemned, abandoned. And they also discovered that their area was the highest density of people under the age of 18 in Indianapolis. So it was out of that they began to envision involving young people in rehabilitating housing.
She organized both that church and ultimately 7 other churches in the neighborhood to band together and form Fountain Square Church and Community Project. The first couple houses they did, it took them about a year to do one house. It was almost all done with volunteers. The women from the church would cook the lunch on Saturday. Volunteers from all over the metropolitan area would come together, bring their own tools, run out and buy materials if they needed them that morning, and they'd work on the house for the day. That led to the first couple of houses being sold to people from the community, typically single moms who had large families and had always rented in very rundown rentals, and were now able to move into owning their own homes.
In the early 90s, bureaucracy intervened. The neighborhood was home to Fletcher Place Investment Corporation, an agency that was funding similar projects.
The Investment Corporation was a purely secular organization, and Fountain Square Church and Community Project was very religiously based.
The organizations that fund community development in Indianapolis said, you know, there's two different community development corporations in the same neighborhood. You guys are going to have to figure out some way that you're not duplicating each other.
So essentially in Fountain Square, they decided rather than to compete, that they would merge.
The easy decision was to keep the same focus on housing and youth development. The harder challenge was merging the secular and faith-based groups' ways of doing business.
The Fletcher Place Investment Corporation had a reputation of not being very connected to the neighborhood, being more interested in bricks and mortar than people. And the Church and Community Project had the reputation of being perhaps just a little too grassroots, not always being very well organized, not always knowing how to go about the larger projects. So I think each group brought their own skills and talents, and each group brought their own weaknesses. Southeast Neighborhood Development, which was the merged organization, kind of represents some of the best of both of the organizations.
The group became more and more a community development corporation in sort of a full-blown sense, doing rental housing development, doing commercial revitalization, doing many more homes with less and less volunteer dependence. Just because what we found through the years is volunteers have a great experience, and there's a great emotional connection that happens, and there are some things that volunteers can do that other people can't.
The collaboration has benefited nearly every block in the neighborhood.
We've seen property values go from the point where 10 years ago, if you wanted to put a new roof on your house, it was a question of, was it really worth doing that, or should I just move? So what we've been able to do is raise property values to the level where people can afford to fix up their house and get their money out.
A sense of pride is returning to the neighborhood.
We had young people in the neighborhood paint a mural on one of the walls down in the business district, and people said, "You're wasting your time, there'll be gang graffiti on that wall within a few days." It's been 10 years and there's no gang graffiti on that wall. And part of the reason is because the very youth that spray the gang graffiti were the youth that did that wall, or their brothers and sisters or their friends. And so I think a lot of it is building a certain kind of esteem in a neighborhood.
The marriage of the two disparate organizations with similar goals seems to be working.
Tension creates energy. When you're, as an organization, forced to continue to adopt and to change, the very energy that creates is a positive thing for that organization.
The church connection and the sense of mission that came from that led to us doing several things that would be different than a typical community development corporation in Indianapolis. One is just the breadth of programs we do. We build parks. We are doing kinds of home repair that other people probably don't emphasize as much. We are doing youth development programs and emphasizing on working with youth in a variety of ways that is very much not typical for a community development corporation.
There's a deep respect on the board and in the leadership for what churches can give, what people of faith can contribute to this neighborhood.
There's a lot of pressure on religious organizations these days to do so many different jobs. Attract new members, erect new buildings, manage social service programs that fill a community's needs. With all that going on, it's possible to overlook the most vital roles for a congregation, being a place people can turn to for meaningful worship and spiritual growth. One of the often overlooked gifts a congregation can offer is the people it sends out into the world. People who are engaged in their communities and secure in their social relationships. and who are willing to shoulder their share, or more, of civic responsibility. If you are interested in additional episodes or more information, visit our website at faithandcommunity.org.